Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on today's webinar. Before we get started, I just want to give you guys a couple of housekeeping items. The first is on the left side of your screen, oh, excuse me, the right side of your screen. There's going to be a box called handouts. In there is a PDF of the PowerPoint that Jim is putting up right now as we speak. And also on the right-hand side of your screen is a box for questions. As all attendees are muted, if you have any questions throughout this broadcast, please feel free to type them in there, and Jim, Dave, and Bob will be happy to answer them at the end. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the guys.
And Corey, are we up with the PowerPoint?
You are all ready to roll.
Hey, Bob.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you, and I just want to welcome everybody to our webinar. I'm having a little technical difficulty, so you won't see me, but you can hear me. Anyhow, my name is Bob Lee. I work for Teachers Pension. I'm a retired assistant superintendent, but we're happy to have you join us today in learning a little bit about what an effective retirement platform does and how it can help you in a comprehensive manner, not just for your employees, but for the district, but also to help you with some of your budgetary problems that we've been discussing probably over the last several weeks now. As you know, we had today's May revise and got some news, got some information that kind of helps you for planning for next year. So the whole goal here today is to tell you about a platform that we have rolled out to districts throughout California, other states as well. And really it's designed to help educate employees, but also educate the district and help employees and help districts with information regarding retirement, but also to have people to become better stewards of their own retirement rather than waiting for somebody to tell them what they should do or what they need to do. Our goal is to try and put something together for you. As you know, with the budget being very difficult and very challenging, sometimes a retirement does wonders for a budget. And so if you can capitalize on 3 or 4 retirements through effective education, through a little bit of convincing, you can save right there $360,000, $400,000 off your budget as you begin the school year. So that will be something that we're going to be talking about, and that will be something that will be kind of one of the focal points of our discussion today. So let's go to the next slide, Jim. So I just want to introduce the 3 people who will be presenting. I told you a little bit about myself. I've worked in a number of school districts throughout California, but I've joined Teachers Pension about 6 years. And one of the reasons I joined Teachers Pension is because I really believe that what they are doing are some of the same values and some of the core beliefs I have, which is really about teaching and helping people to make better decisions and better choices. We want to make our students become productive citizens. We don't tell them what to do. We just try to teach them and let them make their own decisions. So that's kind of why I joined Teachers Pension, because that's what we do. I want to introduce our next host. So Dave.
Hello, everybody. I've been in administration for a number of years. I've had a nice long career that I've enjoyed. Most recently, the superintendent of the Big Oak Flat Groveland Unified School District, small school district, K-12, 1 elementary school of 200 and 2 high schools of 50 each. I was an administrator at Somerville High School for 27 years and have been an ACSA member for 35 years. Been a presenter at a couple different conferences, and I've held a number of offices with the region and our charter. And I joined this company, Teachers Pension, as well, because when I was young and just starting, I was fortunate enough to have someone talk to me about pensions and tax shelters and so on. And so I was able to get started on saving at a young age. Because of that, when I retired, I have some money saved that I can use as need be. But I thought it would be a great idea to help other people get on board during their career, whether it's the beginning, the middle, or the end, but hopefully to get people going as they start in education. Thank you.
And welcome to everybody. I'm Jim Negri. I've had the opportunity to be at about 5 or 6 different SSDA events in the last 2 years and have met a number of you. Spent 41 years in education, the first 11 in Catholic schools in the Diocese of Oakland, and then moved around between 6 districts in the public sector. Been really active in ACSA, as you can see, probably some of you I crossed paths in teaching the Superintendent's Academy over my 15 years. Very active as you are in your local community with the Rotary and the Chamber. And before I turn it back to Bob, I want to just give a big thank you to Corey for all of her behind the scenes work to get this up and running for us. So thank you, Corey.
Hey, you know, a little bit about teachers pension. Who are we? What do we do? And, you know, why do we do what we do? We have a team of retired superintendents who really perform a lot of this work, and we really utilize their knowledge, their background, their relationships, because they're familiar with unions, they're familiar with collective bargaining agreements, they're familiar with the retirement process, and most of all, they're teachers. And as teachers, who else can best work with educators, whether it's certificated or classified employees? We want to teach your employees what they should know about retirement. We specialize in educating public employees on retirement benefits and options. We're not only with public school districts, we're also work with cities, governments, other agencies as well. Teachers pension, and I don't want to mislead you, teachers pension represents all work departments, whether it's certificated or classified or administration. It's just the name that we have. But a little bit about the company. We are a broker, which is different than a vendor. And as a broker, we do not sell products. We do not sell insurance plans or any of that. What we do is we partner with all of your approved vendors on your 403 compare list. And as a partner with all of them, we're able to help employees enroll in any of those 40 to 45 different vendors that you have on that have been approved. One of the things we do believe in is every employee deserves a dignified and financially sound retirement. In order to get there, though, it takes a little bit of work, and we can't just rely on STRS or PERS to get us there. We want everybody to leave education after their 30 plus years and have some very memorable moments, not forced into retirement, but really leaving the education on their terms. We are a platinum sponsors with SSDA, and we're strategic partners with Capital Advisors. We partner up with SSDA, ACSA, CASBO, and with the North-South superintendents. We do many things in California, but we also work in Arizona, Utah, Texas, New Jersey, many other states. We have superintendents in other states that do this work as well. We want to help districts reduce their retirement costs. As you know, 85 to 90% of your budget is personnel costs. And if we can, through our work, have people retire on time as they want to retire on time, it's only going to help you, because you can either fill that position or not fill that position. But that does so much more than having to have to go through the layoff process. Next slide, Jim. You've heard this the last couple of weeks and more today about the budget and what it's going to mean for school districts throughout California. $18 billion less in funding for California schools. What's that going to mean? We're going to find out more June 30th, but right now we do know there is going to be some reductions, and how those reductions come, whether they're programs or schools or employees. But one of the things that we can help you with is to educate your employees, because once they put in those 30 years, they're starting to consider retirement. And if they know what their benefits are of retiring at an age perhaps earlier than they think they can, we'd like to see that. You'd like to see that. And that allows you to fill that position or not fill that position. But right now, with the $18 billion or $19 billion shortfall, it's going to mean some sort of reductions in either programs or people. Next slide there. This is from Bob Blattner on EdSource. You know, how bad is it going to be? It's going to be really bad. It's really bad already. As you know, our revenues are not there and our expenses are up. So you take those two different elements of a budget, revenues and expenses, it just says that it's going to be a very difficult year. Those of you who remember 2008 will remember that year, whether it was furloughs or whether it was shorter school year, whether it was reduction in staff, higher class sizes. Those are some of the things that we had to do in 2008. The rainy day fund, right now there's $16 billion there, but that's going to take legislator all saying we need the money. So whether it goes to education or to different programs the governor has in mind, a lot of different people are going to be looking for that. So let's go to the next slide, Jim. One of the things that are going to be very significant this year is the California rule. Those of you who don't know what that is, California Supreme Court is hearing arguments regarding whether to uphold the California rule. And those of you who are not familiar with the California rule, it's basically, it says that when a public employee is hired, whatever pension benefits are in place when they're hired are the same as when they retire. So in other words, what you're hired with cannot be changed 30 years later because there's not sufficient funds. Well, the California rule basically is upheld by the courts right now, but it is being challenged in the California Supreme Court because different cities, entities are running out of money because of the cost of pensions. Let's go to the next slide, Jim. This is kind of what teacher's pension really focuses on. You know, you're familiar with this pyramid. We use it in curriculum development. We use it in many programs, but what we want to try and do is make sure everything is in alignment, everything is connected, because when you have different programs in place, you want to make sure ed services and business services and human resources are all connected and on board. We take the same approach in our retirement platform. We want to make sure you have the right environment, the right administration, so that whether it's benefit education, your ancillary education, or your retirement education, they're all connected. That's why we put this pyramid together and say everything we do must be connected. And there must be good communication, as opposed to you going out to 4 different doctors and getting 4 different opinions about some sort of illness. You want all of this going back to one doctor so that that one doctor can communicate with you in the best manner possible. This is really what we want to do for the employees, make sure that they are getting all the right information and everything, whether it's from your 125 FSA or the 403B or insurance plans or a third-party administrator, everything funnels up to the employee. So that's why we really utilize this model on everything that we do. Let's go to the next slide, Jim.
So think back to December when you went to winter break, and had you ever heard of COVID-19? Probably not. That has dominated everything since about the end of January. And what's happening is that the markets, the world markets, are fluctuating. Your personal retirement is taking a hit. Everybody is talking about the financial market fluctuations. And CalSTRS and CalPERS are not immune to that. They reported that they've lost $69 billion so far. The Wall Street Journal had an article the other day about pension plans as a whole just taking a beating. And as a result of that, you have employees saying, is my retirement safe? And that's a valid question. The simple answer right now is yes, your STRS and PERS retirement plans are protected. And one of the reasons is because it's a defined benefit plan, not a defined contribution plan. A defined benefit plan is the employer, i.e. the district, is putting a set amount of money in according to a formula, and the employee receives that amount of money by formula when he or she retires. Defined contribution is the employee puts money into like a 401k, a 403b, an IRA, whatever. Currently, STRS and PERS are protected. Bob mentioned the court case on the California rule. There's going to be legislative discussion about, do we change the formulas, which they did in 2012, and we'll talk more about that later. The bottom line is, no matter what happens with the California rule in the courts, no matter what the legislature does, almost every employee will end up with a retirement income gap, which is very simply what they collect from STRS and PERS is less than what they made on their last paycheck. And our goal is to educate people to close that gap so that they can have that dignified and financially sound retirement. So take a look at that heading, retirement planning equals budget savings. And you're probably going, what is he talking about? That's an oxymoron. And when I was a superintendent, retirement planning to me was, okay, how much is STRS and PERS going up this year? How big a budget hit is it? But in reality, retirement planning is much more. By offering your employees good retirement planning, providing financial literacy, it's just a plain good management practice. Secondly, it helps your employees plan for their retirement, and it allows them to retire with a financially sound one. And it definitely impacts your personnel costs, as we will show you. How many of you have had employees stay for that last one big raise before they retire so they can bump their STRS or PERS? Well, there's probably not going to be any one big last raise in the next couple of years. So by financially planning for a sound retirement, employees retire on a normal cycle rather than stay on 2, 3, 4 years past when they would normally retire. It allows the employee to retire on his or her time schedule, and that has a benefit to the district. We'll talk about that. It reduces your CalPERS and your CalSTRS because you don't have a large percentage of your employees in your lower right-hand corner of your salary scale. And it reduces your costs for operating, but you have no cost to implement this. Teachers' Pension implements it for you. We implement it for you at no cost, and we do the work. And then I think the best part of it is that it sends a message to your employees that you care about them. And when employees feel valued, they stay. You're not facing turnover all the time. Whenever I present to a district, I always thank the district. I tell them, your district cares about you because they're providing this education at no cost. And as Bob mentioned, typically total personnel costs run 85 to 95% or 90% of your budget. If you could eliminate 1 to 3 or maybe 4% of those costs in any year, wouldn't that help you? And especially in the years that we're looking at in the next couple. And if you can have staff retire and not continue to stay, you can reduce that. It's also a leverage point. People who are working beyond when they want to work could be a morale problem on a staff. They may not be working up to the potential they once demonstrated or the ability they once demonstrated. And when people continue to stay, you are not able to hire new people. So that has an advantage to you. And as I said, our retirement platform is done at no cost to the district. And I come out of the C&I side of the house, so I've always treated it as RTI for retirement, and it's education. We are educating your employees as we go forward. So this is something that we talk about quite a bit, is the income gap. And these are actual 2019 numbers from CalSTRS. There is a chart for PERS. I don't have it, but typically the average is you start working at 43.2, you retire at 87.2, and you get 46.6 from CalSTRS. That means you have a gap of over $40,000. Now, none of you on this call is average. None of your employees are average, because we all hire excellent employees. But these are real numbers from CalSTRS that the average retiree has a gap of $40,000. So what we try to do is close that gap, cut it in half, cut it by more than half, so that they can retire financially sound. The sad part of it is that only 30% of school employees are doing any planning for post-retirement. So that's where we come in, and I'm going to turn it to Dave to talk about retirement options.
Thanks, Jim. So the next 3 slides have to do with retirement, like most of them, I guess, in this presentation. But they really demonstrate the need for your employees to have an education in financial literacy. So some of the issues that come up, of course, with when you're near retirement is, how will you use your retirement savings? You know, have you saved beyond what you expect to get from CalSTRS or PERS? Do you have any accounts? How will you use those? Which pension beneficiary options are you choosing? That's very important. And a lot of people really don't have any idea what those choices are and how they impact your income. What plans are available and how much can you write off for taxes? Do you know what your defined benefit supplement is? And those are accounts that every employee has, every teaching or certificated employee has, and that's something that you need an education on if you don't know. I think that's so important. If you're nearing retirement, you may not have all the things saved that you wish you had, and that may impact, you know, the date of your retirement, but you can still check and meet with a financial advisor to find out the answers to the questions that we have there. Next slide, Jim. So what if you're mid-career? If you're mid-career, you might be thinking about retirement as opposed to when you're a new teacher or a new employee. You know, what will your income gap be? Have you even looked to see what your retirement income might be depending on when you retire, how many years of service, what's your age factor, and so on? Do you have any accounts currently, and how long have you had them? If you haven't had any accounts, that certainly is a good time to, again, meet with a financial advisor and talk about that. Do you have children that you're saving for college, or you wish you had, or you would like to save for college attendance, or for other financial matters that you might have in your family? And then should you save pre-tax or post-tax? And that would depend on, again, a meeting and the goals you and your significant other have. Now, if you're just starting out, this is the time to get going. And these are the people that we really hope we can get to get some education, because the hardest thing to do is to get started on a 403B or a 457 or Roth account. Once you start, as those of you who haven't these accounts know, it's easy to continue. You might, as your salary changes, you might contribute more, but getting started is the main thing. And, you know, if you're new, that doesn't mean you're 23 and right out of college. Do you have any retirement accounts from anything you've done previously? Have you worked in the a private sector, for example? Do you pay into Social Security? Now, are you paying into CalSTRS or PERS? Because that makes a difference too. Are you a dual income household? Does your significant other work and have a pension as well? That, of course, determines or helps determine what your goals might be. And do you have any personal account for, you know, savings down the road? Starting out is a key, and then those are the people that we'd really like to impact. However, if you're in the middle of a career or the end of a career, retirement is still on your mind, and as has been mentioned before, if people retire on their timeline, they're not hanging around for you to have a higher payroll and so on.
So one of the things I was going to mention when I was working in the HR department, it's there's only about 30% of all employees who participate in supplemental pensions. And when you think about 30%, if you had 1,000 employees, that means 300 do this and 700 do not do this. And if you looked at yourself and said, can I afford to retire without a supplemental pension? I think most people would say no, because there has to be some sort of other source of income besides STRS or PERS or Social Security. So that's why it's significant to talk to new educators, because when they start young, they're going to be in it for the duration. If you miss them when they first enroll in this working with a school district, it's a little bit more challenging, but it still can be done. The reason there is because you haven't received a paycheck. If you haven't received a paycheck, you don't know that the $50 that you have contributed to something is really $25 in taxable income. So it's really half of what you actually put in. But if you put in $50 a month at age 23 for the next 34 years, you'd be quite surprised what that $50 would look like. So let's go to the next slide, Jim. I wanted to tell you about in 2008, when there was significant economic difficulties there, we negotiated some changes, but we didn't want to negotiate changes for people who were currently enrolled in the system like STRS or PERS. But what we did with legislators is say, let's make some changes in 2013. Remember, this is 2008, so it's 5 years to the future, talking about people who haven't even come to work in public education. So that's what we did. We agreed that in 5 years that we would change the system. So if you look at whether it's CalSTRS or CalPERS, you look at below that you get 2% at age 60 if you were hired before 2012. And you get 2% at age 62 if you're hired after 2013. So it means that you had to work 2 more years in order to get the 2%. If you want to retire at 60 before 2012, you get the 2%. If you retire at age 60 after 2013, you'd receive less than 2%. So the same thing goes with CalPERS or the classified side, but the one big difference on CalPERS, look at the age difference. It's almost 7 years. Well, it is 7 years. So a person at age 55 would retire at 2% prior to 2013. After 2013, they would have to work till age 62. Next slide, Jim. So here's a quick example of that. I'm sure you've seen this before. You just take your age factor times your salary times your years of service, and that gives you your pension. But here's an example of somebody who worked 30 years. If they put in 30 years of service at age 60, and they have the 2% age factor, so they would retire at 60% of their salary. So 60% of, let's say, $100,000 would mean that you would retire with a pension of $60,000. I'm just trying to use simple math right now. So that's how that works. Somebody that starts after 2013, they would have to retire at age 62. See, and here's an example of the difference. Somebody who puts in 30 years and wants to retire at age 60 after 2013, their age factor would be 1.76, not 2%, 1.76. So when you multiply that by the 30 years, you would retire at 52.8%. So that's almost 7.5% lower if you wanted to retire at age 60. Okay, next slide, Jim. So this is kind of what it looks like if you were in CalSTRS. You could see highlighted in yellow on the left is somebody prior to 2013, and somebody after 2013 is on the right. Being age 60, you get 2%. On the right, at age 60, you get 1.76%. So they said that about 25% of our employees would qualify to retirement after 2013. So about 75% of our employees are under the traditional system, and about 25% are in the modified system. Next slide, Jim. So here's CalPERS, your classified employees. And again, the major difference is the age factor. To get the 2% prior to 2013, you only had to be age 55. And after 2013 hire, you'd have to be age 62. So there's 7 years difference in order to get the same amount in terms of the age factor. Next slide, Jim.
So when I present in person, this is where you get your stretch break. I usually say to people, have you ever paid into Social Security? If you have, stand up. So since I can't see you, you can stand up if you want, do your stretch, which you probably have been doing anyway. But seriously, Bob is just taking you through the calculations for STRS and PERS. Social Security comes into play, but it comes into play in different ways. If you are a certificated employee under STRS, you do not pay into Social Security, and therefore you are going to have restrictions on what you do collect for your prior payments. CalPERS classified folks do pay into Social Security. They pay 6.2%. If you are in STRS, you're either paying 9.2 or 10.25%, depending on when you're hired. Now, there are two factors that come into play: the windfall elimination and the government pension. I'll do them very quickly. So if you have worked in Social Security, a Social Security job, and I'll use myself as an example, since I worked in the private sector before I came into STRS, I was fully vested in Social Security before I came to a STRS position. However, under windfall elimination, I do not receive all of my Social Security payment. They calculate what it is, and because I have 20 years of substantial earnings, I only get 40% of the Social Security that I would normally qualify for. You have to have worked 10 years in the system, 40 quarters, and then this is a chart. What I would encourage everybody to do is go out to the Social Security Administration website, run your numbers. Don't count. So many employees think, oh, I'm going to retire and I'm going to get Social Security. No, you're not going to get all your Social Security. So that's one factor. The second one is GPO. I always think of a GTO car when I was in high school, but government pension offset. Complicated. Each of you has a different situation. That's why I will tell you to talk to a financial advisor. But very simply, if you are in STRS and your spouse is in Social Security and your spouse predeceases you, it is highly unlikely that you're going to receive any of the Social Security death benefits. So need to work with an advisor and calculate that, because that goes into your retirement planning. So what I'm going to do now is turn it back to Dave to talk about how you can plan to close that income gap. Dave, are you there?
Yes, I am.
There
Okay.
you go.
So to meet your financial objectives, this little chart shows some of the examples. But first of all, a 403B and a 457 are like the 401k for educators and other nonprofits, if you weren't aware of that. But there are many things that you can use these accounts for. You can help pay for a college education for your Offspring, it could be for you going back to school to get a different degree. There's a chance to pay off debt. Could be credit card, could be a payment on a vehicle, or whatever that might be. Home purchase, also you can borrow money from your account for a home purchase, maybe a down payment. You can buy back years of service. It would be an income tax write-off, depending on whether you get a pre-tax or a post-tax Roth account. And of course, it's an emergency fund. And I can tell you that personally, my wife and I used our account to get our master's degree and our administrative credentials a few years ago, but that's what we used ours for, and it was great. We paid ourselves back instead of paying back a bank or some other lending institution. Next slide, please, Jim. So if you are looking at options for an effective financial retirement situation, many people don't participate because they, for a number of reasons, but one would be they don't understand exactly what that means and what it does. They maybe don't trust people with their money. That's another thing that you hear. I don't want to give so-and-so any of my money because I don't know what they're going to do with it. They may believe that the money's not accessible until you're a certain age. And that isn't the case, but that's something that people might not be aware of. And others might think it's a cost rather than a benefit. I think it basically means there's a need to understand these particular options and really have some education in financial literacy. And as was mentioned before, there's maybe in the 30% range of people in education that actually do take advantage of some of these plans, and most of them don't. And I think it's fair to say that classified employees take less advantage than certificated. Next slide, please, Jim. So what are the loan options? And by the way, Jim will talk later about the CARES Act, which has changed some of these amounts that you can borrow from, but you can access your money prior to retirement. And there's a little bubble that says up to 50%, but I believe that's changed. You can access it tax and penalty free under certain circumstances. And if you do borrow from your account, you typically have a 5-year payback, different if it's a home purchase, but in my wife and my situation, we had a 5-year payback and the interest rate was very reasonable. So it was really worth our while to pay ourselves back. Next slide. So there's a retirement plan for everyone. It's just a matter of becoming educated. And that's what Teachers Pension does. Teachers Pension gives a very good opportunity for districts to have their employees be educated financially. Okay, next slide, Jim. So as far as tax shelter options, there as you probably know, there are many. But one thing that one of our financial advisors would do is conduct a risk assessment of you and your partner to decide what your tolerance level is. And depending on what that is, there are different accounts. Fixed and indexed accounts are those that you would not lose money on, but your rate of return would be a little bit less. Fixed would be a smaller amount. Indexed, there's a cap on what you would earn. And variable, if you're brave and bold, then you would be playing the market. If the market's up, like it was prior to December, you'd be in great shape. If you're still in, then you're probably feeling some pain right now. But those are things that this risk assessment does, is let people know where you stand in that department. I think probably most people in education are less risky, but that's up to the individual. So if you have this risk tolerance questionnaire done, then you really have a chance to make a wise choice on what works for you, and also what maybe dollar amount would make sense for you to contribute. Either way, getting started is the main thing. If you already have accounts, we suggest that you still sit down with a financial advisor and find out if those accounts are still viable for you and your family.
Okay.
Next slide.
So, well, it's never too early or too late to begin planning if you haven't done it. I'm going to show you an example of that right now. So let's go to the next slide. Here's an example of somebody who started investing at age 25 versus somebody who started at age 35. Difference of 10 years. They retire at age 60, hypothetically. But you can see there's 3 different charts below. There's one for $100 a month, there's one for $300 a month, and there's one for $500 a month. That's what the individual would be contributing to a 403B or 457. But you can see what happens when you put in $100 a month, what it looks like at age 25 versus age 35. It almost doubles. Same thing with $300 a month. The only difference is there's more money in the accounts. And finally, at $500 a month, it's almost $750,000 versus $500,000. So it's quite significant. If you can start at age 25, it's really about compounding. And when you take that dollar and put it in at age 25, what it ends up being at age 60 is quite significant. Okay, next slide.
So Bob just showed you why it's critical to help your employees understand why they need to plan for their retirement. If they know that they're financially sound, then they will begin looking at retirement on their terms, not having to wait for that last big bump in the retirement plan. So we're going to finish up with the CARES Act. Dave alluded to it, that the CARES Act has made some changes that will impact your employees. Your employees and you have probably started receiving the recovery rebates. As you know, they're $1,200 to individuals, $2,400 to married filed jointly, and $500 for dependent children. So, but as with every government program, there are exceptions. Those exceptions are tied to the adjusted gross income for a single. It phases out at $99,000 a year, and married filed jointly at $9,800. But there's plenty of information out on that. And the key is, if you have not filed your 2019 tax return, they'll use your 2018. So, but here's where the CARES Act really kicks in. Dave talked a lot about borrowing against his own accounts, but there's also ways to take your money out. However, if you pull your money out of a retirement account before 59 and a half, you're subject to a 10% penalty. What the CARES Act has done is reduce the penalty to 0. There's no penalty. You still, and there are conditions where you can do it. You can take up to $100,000. You are still liable for the taxes. What we would encourage people to do is not take the money out unless they have to. We would encourage the next option, which are loans. And Dave has shown what the loan provisions were. It used to be 50% of the participant's value. Under CARES, it's 100% up to $100,000 of your investment. So you are basically loaning yourself your money and paying it back at a much lower interest rate. That is something that your employees can take advantage of and should definitely look at if they're having financial difficulties. And it's another reason that if you have been investing, you have some money to borrow against. Then the next one, I think, impacts a large number of your employees. Student loans. Currently, there is $1.6 trillion in student loans out there, larger than the auto loan debt, larger than the credit card debt. The typical educator with a loan owes $50,000 with a $600 a month payment. The CARES Act provides a 6-month forbearance with no interest. So they can have 6 months not paying back their loan. That's a nice chunk of money for an individual, especially if they're early in their career. The kicker is it's not automatic. The employee must contact the loan servicer. So please make sure you let your employees with student loans know that. And we are looking at providing some workshops on student loans in the future. So that's important. And what I want to do is turn it back to Bob to talk a little bit about what else we offer.
We want to conclude our discussion today and show you a couple resources. Obviously, Teachers Pension would love to work with your district. We work with many county office of eds, charter schools, school districts throughout California. But you can go to one of our websites and really check out the online resources. You can watch videos there. There's financial calculators and there's helpful articles to read about pensions and so forth like that. So this is something that will be in a packet, but you can check this out, this particular website out, and it can help you to see a little bit more about the work that Teachers Pension does. Next slide, please. You know, California school pension crisis, who pays and what could be done? As you know, districts have been paying more and more for the last 8 years. We don't have charts and graphs, but in a nutshell, we used to pay 8%, 8.25%. Now it's almost 20%. It's forecast to go up to 30%. How does a district pay for that? Going from 8.25% up to 30%, it's very difficult to do that. Governor has given us a 2-year stay where he has contributed one-time monies to help with lessening that pension debt. But at some point in time, that will change. And so this is something that you might want to look at. This little broadcast here, who pays and what can be done. There's only 3 ways that pensions can be paid for: the state, the district, and the employee. And so if you look at all those and say, okay, states doesn't look like it has sufficient funds, that then puts the shoulder of this contributing to the pensions to the employer and the employee. And that's really where it looks like it's going towards. How do districts continue to pay more, and how do employees contribute more? And that's what we try to do, is help employees understand that they have to be part of the solution. They have to be part of this. It can't be all upon the school district or the state to, you know, to have somebody's pension be something that they can live with at age 58 or 60. So Teachers Pension really tries to educate employees to start early, to understand what it is to be part of the solution. And that's all we try to do, is just teach and help employees become better stewards. I don't see that we have any questions. So we want to thank all of you for participating in this webinar. There's our contact number. If you have any information, questions, we'd love to work with you and help out. So thank you very much for being here today with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Corey, are there any questions?
No, not that I see right now. But yes, as Bob mentioned, you know, their contact information is in that PowerPoint. To grab that handout. I will be sending out a recorded copy of this presentation to everybody tomorrow, along with a copy of the PowerPoint. So feel free to send that to any of your colleagues that you feel would benefit from it. And if you have trouble reaching Jim, Dave, or Bob, you can always email me at corey@ssda.org, and I'll be happy to connect you guys.
Thank you, and we wish you the best in the coming year.
Thank you all so much, and thank you so much for attending our webinar today. Have a great day. Oh, Tim, did you want to say something before I log off? Oh, looks like we lost him. Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.